So we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you so much to our amazing sponsors. If you have not had a chance yet to chat with them down in the expo hall, please go down, take the time. These conferences are not cheap to put on, and our amazing sponsors not only support these community events, but also support a bunch of our partners and our customers. So please take the time to stop by and visit them. Quick introduction. I'm going to go a little bit quicker than I usually do. So please tell me if you need me to slow down my speed a little bit, but technical issues. My name is Skye Tyler. I'm a Salesforce MVP, a solution architect, and I work at an organization called Beyond the Horizon that focuses on nonprofit organizations. And I've been doing this for about 10 years, and I'm passionate about the role that nonprofits fill in our communities and believe that they deserve access to world-class technology to better meet their mission, which is why I work on the Salesforce platform. When I'm not Salesforcing, I am also an avid nature nerd. And if you couldn't tell from my accent, I am not from here. I am from the Western North Carolina mountains in the US. Don't hold it against me. And today we're going to be talking about transparency in AI. Quick expectation setting here, preparation, right? So this is our agenda for today. We're going to talk first about data governance and how you and your organization can get really clear on your data governance, and then get really, really clear on your AI governance. What this session is not is a step-by-step of how to do AI. There are other sessions that go into much more detail. And if I was doing that in 20 minutes, then I would have serious doubts about the quality of my skills. Then we're going to talk about a little bit of that launching side. So once you've done some of that governance and AI preparation work, talking about some of the ways that you and your teams can collect potential use cases, evaluate them, determine good fits for your organization for using AI, and then some of the practices to instantiate when you're launching AI. But again, not a step-by-step process. I do want to start this, though, with a short story about AI. So quick show of hands, does anybody remember the first time you interacted with AI or machine learning? One person, two people. Okay. My first time, I'm going to date myself a little bit, was back in about 2004, so almost 20 years ago now. I was in a carpool at work, and one of the guys in the carpool was just sharing that over the weekend, he had installed a biodiesel converter kit to his classic VW Beetle. And I was like, I have no idea what those words mean, except for the VW Beetle part. So I get back to my office that morning and I do a search. I can't even say I Google because this was 2004. It was probably like Ask Jeeves or something. So I search for, I got a few smiles from some of the folks on that one. So I search for biodiesel converter, and a couple of sites that sell it come up, a couple of articles and blog posts and came up. And I read a little bit about it. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Take like used French fry oil and filter it, and now my car runs on it. I'm never going to do this, but now I know something I didn't know before. And I close in my browser and I go on about my day. Later that day, I log into my Yahoo email. Again, don't judge me. This was 2004. I log into my Yahoo email, and all of a sudden on the right-hand side, there's all these advertisements for biodiesel converter kits. And it freaked me out because I hadn't registered that what I'm doing on one website over here is being tracked and used by another system. Creeps me out. Fast forward to today, we expect our systems to do this. We want Netflix to recommend the next show when we finished binging something, right? We want Amazon or an online seller to recommend other books or other shoes. We want our dating apps to say, maybe you would like this person. We expect this kind of interaction. So a lot's changed in 20 years, but some things haven't. The trust and the transparency layer is still important to avoid that creepy feeling. So jumping into that, when we talk about the preparation, this is what to do before you do the AI, before you actually get into Agent Builder and start using guidelines and guardrails. So moving into this part, when we think about the data governance piece, we all know that data is the lifeblood of our organization, and it's the thing that the AI is going to be interacting with. So it should be really good quality data, right? Because anybody heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out, right? So we want to make sure that we've got policies and practices in place for monitoring, just making sure it's the right thing up there, for monitoring what data we're collecting, when and why we're collecting it. And ideally, we're maintaining a data dictionary. Now, if you've had to do a migration into Salesforce, or you've done any other kind of platform type migration, you probably had a data mapping document This field in this system is going to this field on this object, right? But then once the migration is done, what happens to that document? It's immediately out of date, right? If it even made it through the migration up to date. When you think about how to maintain and manage your data governance in this new AI world going forward, having a data dictionary is one of the fundamental tools. It'll help you to understand where that data is coming from, where it lives, and what it's being used or referenced by. With that data quality piece is understanding what's a good record, right? What's a good opportunity record? What fields are populated? What values are selected? Does anybody here work with organizations that collect date of birth? Few. Okay. So, working in the nonprofit space, most of my clients end up asking for or requesting date of birth from their participants. But for various reasons, there are some folks who don't trust giving their date of birth to an organization. And so, a lot of times, it's a required field, right? Because we make it required because it's important. But if it's required and I don't want to give you my date of birth, someone's going to make it up, right? So now technically that field's populated, but is it good data? So having standards in place that may say if the participant doesn't want to give you their date of birth, then put in January 1st, 1900. Now you've got a way to be able to report which of these fields has good data in it and which field is just populated because it's required. Date of birth is just an example. Your organization may have different fields that are required, but people still get creative about how they populate it. Making sure that you also understand your data life cycle, right? And this is especially important in places that are under the GDPR. If someone has asked to be forgotten, do you have a plan in place for what it means to forget that information, to purge and no longer retain it, while also not losing key or critical business information? I had a client whose legal department wanted them to delete everything that was 10 years old or older. And that may sound like a good idea on the surface. We don't need to be holding on to old information. But this was a human service organization, and they've been in service for over 20 years. If you just deleted the contact information for people that were more than 10 years old, you've now hobbled my ability to apply for grants and funding because I can't show the length of time and the number of people that we've served. And then also, when you break it down by demographics, I can't show how many women I've served or how many veterans or how many children. So it's not always as easy as just delete it when it gets to a certain age, but maybe you have to come up with a process to anonymize it or to store it in a different method where you can respect someone's privacy rights, respect your legal or requirements around audit compliance, while also still being able to complete your business practices. Speaking of practices, you've got your data governance plan and policies, but then you actually have data governance practices, tangible things that you or your team are doing. So when you think about those actual collection practices, if you're using a web form, can you add validation on the web form itself so that you make sure when someone puts an email address in, it's coming in the proper format or a phone number field? Thinking again also about privacy and consent. Quick show of hands. Who here, when you go to a new website for the first time and the little pop-up comes up about your cookies, who here just clicks approve all? Couple people. Who rejects all cookies? Most people. Okay. Who here says, I'm going to be very discerning and I will manage my cookies and preferences for each website? Yeah, exactly. So when you think about how you're going to be using this data that you're collecting from people in this new AI-enabled world, updating your data collection privacy policy consents to be able to inform people. So if someone does manage preferences, they will be aware and informed about how their data may be used or acted on with AI. Monitoring and analysis are critical for both data governance and, as we'll talk about, for the AI governance piece. Having plans, processes, tools, and systems in place that enable your teams to be able to monitor what your data quality is, analyze where it could be improved, and then assign actions to actually improve that data. And then the cleaning part, this can be varied, right? Maybe it's actually just picking up the phone and calling someone and being like, hey, I need your new email address or I need your new mailing address. It could also be third-party apps, maybe an address validation app to make sure that an address that someone gave you is an actual mailing address or a physical address. And then the storage, retention, and purging ties in directly to what we just talked about with the data lifecycle. So, quick questions, anything about data governance, policies, or practices? All right. Quick show of hands. Anybody have like a CEO or a VP who's just chomping at the bit to use AI? And they're just like, we have to do this. We have to do this. If we're not doing it now, we're behind everyone. Okay. If you have that person in your organization, this is your first AI step. If you do not already have instantiated data governance in your org, this is the first step. Because without good data, you can't trust the output of any AI that you implement. Okay, so jumping into AI governance, when you're thinking about your AI governance plan, making sure that the way you've defined your AI governance aligns with your mission and values. Now, as I mentioned, I work primarily with nonprofit organizations, so missions and values are kind of an important thing for us. But it is also important in the for profit and even the government sector. So, making sure that you're looking through the lens of your mission and your values when you're defining how you're going to use AI. Part of that also needs to include an evaluation of fairness and transparency because bias is a real thing. And so thinking about how are we going to make sure that whatever AI we're launching is going to perform in the most fair way as possible? How are we going to account for bias, unconscious or otherwise? And how are we going to review to make sure that there aren't unintended consequences of the AI that we launch? Being really transparent is also just a way to build trust with your stakeholders and your constituents. So, being clear if text is generated with generative AI, if images are created with generative AI, if assessments or evaluations use AI in its algorithm or process, making sure that people, both your internal users and any external stakeholders, are aware of that. Also, making sure that as part of your plan, you have both a decision matrix and a risk assessment matrix. I'm going to use an example of the risk assessment in a moment. But these two tools together can help to make sure that your AI governance is not a personal preference based system. And so, if you have one of those leaders who's really pushing hard for AI, and the use case that they have doesn't meet your risk assessment or doesn't fall into the decision matrix for acceptable use, you have quantifiable evidence for why that is the case instead of just having to tell your CEO no, because that doesn't usually go over well with them. As far as AI practices, thinking about the AI related data lifecycle. So, what information is your AI authorized to interact with? Right? Maybe you have some things that live in a data warehouse outside of Salesforce that it should not be accessing, but because you have Data Cloud, it can actually get to it. How are you going to put those guardrails in place to make sure that it's interacting with the right or appropriate data? Having a communication plan in place. Communication is not just, yeah, we're going to let people know when something goes wrong. A communication plan is identifying who is responsible for communicating what information with what frequency and to whom. And if one or more of those criteria are not met, it's not a plan, it's a hope. And then the last piece, as we mentioned with the data part, same thing with AI, monitoring and analysis. How do you plan to make sure that your AI continues to do what you expect it to do and does not start doing what you don't want it to do? All right, questions about the preparation piece. All right, let's move on to how to do some of the AI. And as I mentioned, this is not a step by step. So, when you're thinking about launching your first AI project, we're going to walk through some of these steps here. And then in a moment, I'm going to give an example for how you can do this. So, the first thing to do, once you've done your data governance, once you've done your AI governance, and you're ready to pick your first project, identify all your stakeholders. And I mean all of them. So this is internal stakeholders and users and potential external stakeholders that could be implemented or could be impacted by the AI process so that you make sure that all the voices are being heard. This is especially a great point to get naysayers in, people who aren't necessarily early adopters, because they're the ones who are going to give you a little bit of a reality check about how great your AI plan could be. They're going to be the ones that say, yeah, it could also be catastrophic. And you want to think about that before it goes live. You want to make sure that everybody's fully read in on the AI governance plan. And what this is not is emailing it to them beforehand and saying, please read this, right? Because that's not going to happen. So making sure, going over the highlights of what do people need to know and understand about the governance structure for AI. You've ideally probably already collected a couple use cases. So for each of those use cases, you've run them through the decision matrix. And for any of the ones that pass the decision matrix, you're then going to run it through the risk assessment matrix. Once you've decided this is what we're going to work on, then you confirm your communication plan and you confirm your monitoring plan. You're doing all of this before you ever open up Salesforce's Agent Builder. Everybody nod? You're doing all of this first. Okay. Here's an example of a risk assessment with the dimensions of risk. It's not just how bad could it be, it's how likely is it for it to happen. So if something is highly unlikely to happen, but could have catastrophic impact, that's a high risk. If something could have low impact, but is very likely to happen or will happen frequently, that could also be a high risk. Now, just because something's high risk doesn't mean you just throw it away, but you have to have mitigation steps in place to plan for how to either prevent it or address it when it happens. So practical example, using AI internally within your Salesforce instance to do a data analysis and cleanup project. The benefit of this is twofold. One, you're getting experience of using Agent Builder and using AI in a safer way because it's only internal facing. You don't have to worry about the AI sending the wrong message to someone. And it also just gives you the opportunity to work on cleaning up the data that other agents will be using in the future. So you'd be identifying your stakeholders, people from all of the different departments, and ideally you have an executive champion, explaining the AI governance and highlighting the key parts to make sure everyone's on the same page, running it through the decision matrix. It's already past that because we've decided this is our first project. It meets our mission and our values. And then you've done your risk assessment. The risk is pretty low. Maybe the highest risk is if you have part of the agent that's going to be modifying data on your records, you have the potential to overwrite important information. So the mitigation is we're going to do a full backup before we actually go live with anything or test anything. And we're also going to do this in a sandbox first so that if anything goes wrong, it's not live in production. And then we have a plan in place to be able to communicate out. Once you've gone through this, now you have the lather, rinse, repeat process. So you do it all in a sandbox environment. You're going to test it for both positive and negative use cases. Is it doing what we want? Is it not doing what we don't want? And then you're going to have all of the stakeholders involved in that testing process so that you're getting a full 360-degree view. Is it doing what we want it to do? And then you would deploy it. Once it's deployed, you have your frequency of how you're going to monitor it and how often. You've got measures to be able to validate those outcomes and make sure that it's still meeting the expectations. You have your responsible parties assigned to be doing the monitoring and also to be doing the communication. And then once it's live and you've got it going and it's flowing, you still need to continue to monitor that. So if all of a sudden you get a new historical data set imported, or you connect to a new external system, or you start getting data from a web app, you want to go back to any of the AI that's acting on the data that's coming in and make sure that it hasn't changed its behavior with the introduction of that new data set. This is where that data dictionary becomes really critical. So wrapping up in this very quick presentation and this very scientific chart, you can see that more than half of the effort that you're putting into any AI project should be in the preparation phase. The launching it is the really exciting phase. Ooh, it's live and everyone's excited. Yay, confetti on your screen. But then the monitoring remains critical. And that piece is important as you're working with learning technology. And just as a quick wrap up, I do want to highlight with every new technology, there's a period of hype and excitement and magic wand thinking. And very rarely does it live up to that hype. AI is most likely not going to be any different. So instead of looking at AI as your magic bullet that's going to solve all of your problems, do this foundational work on your data and your AI governance process and get that foundational critical piece of your system solid. And then layer on top of that the excitement that goes along with AI. Thank you all so much. If you were not aware of this in the earlier session, on the back of your program is a QR code for the app for the event. If you open that app and then scan this QR code, you can give me feedback on the session. There's also opportunities to give feedback on the conferences. Thank you all so much for coming, and I would encourage you in future Irish Dreamins or other community events to please consider submitting a talk or a presentation, because I promise you, you know something that somebody else can benefit from, and this whole community is better the more involved people are. So thank you very much.